We are at the tail end of Medium-Term Plan 3 of Vision 2030. Under MTP3, 226 projects are supposed to be implemented. Where are we in terms of implementation? Almost 12 months before the end of the project. This week on Inside Government, we are talking about Vision 2030. We are tracking the progress, the challenges, and of course the opportunities. And joining us on Inside Government is Kenneth Muige. He's the Director General of Vision 2030. Thank you very much indeed for finding time to be with us. Very good. We must appreciate the fact that Nairobi looks absolutely beautiful from where we are.
Today is a warmer day than most days this week.
And the most interesting thing is that one of the most significant projects that is likely to change the face of Nairobi, the Nairobi Expressway, is less than 500 meters from where we are. Yep. This is part of MTP3. Tell us more about it.
I think all of us are familiar with the traffic jams in this city. And like most cities in the world, we waste billions of shillings. Just think how much it costs sitting in the jam in a car, whether it's a private car or a matatu or a bus or any form of public transport. If you take 3 hours to get to work in the morning and you take another 3 hours to get back home in the evening, that's 6 hours lost of productivity. So if you count the number of cars in the traffic jams on all our roads and multiply that by productivity, you'll find that you are wasting billions of shillings. So this expressway is expected to change the face of Nairobi, first of all. Many people from upcountry have never seen a staircase road. Many people in this city have never seen an expressway as well. I mean, for many of us, it's the first time to see it. So we expect this to not only change the face of Nairobi, but also to deal with the traffic jams, particularly on Mombasa Road. Because we're discovering as the city is expanding, a lot of people are moving towards Kajiado and Machakos counties. And it's imperative that you're able to travel to work within a reasonable point of time. So this expressway is going to make a big difference.
And this is one of the 226 flagship projects that are supposed to have been put in place by the end of MTP3. What are the other projects that we are expecting?
MTP3 has very many projects, as you know. There's projects all the way from the coast, all the way from Lamu Port, around Mombasa, Dongo-Kundu bypass and special economic zone. If you go to Kisumu, on the other side of the country, you have the shipyard, you have the port, which has been operationalized. If you go north, we are finishing the road connection between Kitale, Kapenguria and Lodwar. If you look southwestern Kenya, the road from Kisumu to Isabania, the road from Kisumu to Isabania is being sorted out as well. So there's a lot going on in the country. Despite the challenges we've faced in the last 2 years.
And you're talking about the expansion of ports, construction of new roads, and of course operationalization of other projects. In your own review, which of these projects do you think is going to be very significant under the MTP3?
Flagship projects, by their definition, are all significant. They're called flagship projects because of the effect or the impact they have on the country, on populations, and on the economy. So when they are chosen as flagship projects, that means they are all pretty much on the same level. What is important in this particular MTP, as we come to the end of it, is to see how well we can recover from the shock of COVID, particularly. COVID has devastated the global economy. It has hit us particularly hard in Kenya. And if you want to see the effect COVID has had on societies and communities, you don't need to look further than what is happening in South Africa right now. And this is what we're trying to see whether we can accelerate in the last few months of this MTP, accelerate exactly what was planned to see whether we can get all these projects to a stage where we expected them to be.
And when MTP3 was launched back in the year 2018, I mean, the country was reeling from the shocks of a highly disruptive electioneering period. And it is also coming to an end when the economy has been severely disrupted because of COVID-19. How will this too affect the implementation of MTP3?
Well, we all have been affected by COVID-19, all of us. It doesn't matter whether in the public sector or the private sector. And the effect has been serious for most people, especially in the private sector. As you know, government does not make money. government facilitates the private sector. The private sector makes money, pays taxes, and then government has money to spend on the common good. So there's been a big reduction in the amount of tax revenue which is collected in this period, understandably because economic activities have gone down. So we are operating in a constrained fiscal environment in terms of the money available to do things. The capacity of citizens to pay taxes is directly linked to the level of economic activity. We still have a curfew in place. So if you find some sectors like the hospitality sector, the entertainment sector, they are still struggling, they are still on their knees. So if you look at the effects of COVID, we have to temper our hopes with realism, because the reality is that COVID is still here. And if you look back 100 years to the last time we had a COVID type, the last global pandemic, which was exactly 100 years ago, that time it lasted 3 years to get sorted out. So we are hoping that we will not get all the way up to 3 years, but people should be psychologically prepared to understand that COVID is not something which is hitting us and running. It is a condition we're going to have to live with for a long time. So this is, all these issues are constraining the capacity of government and citizens as well to perform as expected. And that means, of course, a reduction in the expectations of what we hope to achieve.
When you look at the impact of COVID-19 on Vision 2030, of course it is expected that as a country we are likely to go through some physical challenges because of slowed economic activities. Which projects are most likely to be the hardest hit?
I think all projects are equally affected because it's hard to prioritize one over the other. And remember, these projects are being implemented by many different institutions. So when it's a flagship project and finance has been provided for it in the budget, then it is being implemented. So it's hard to single out one particular one because it depends on the sector you're talking about. If you talk to a transporter, they will tell you that the most important thing is the road infrastructure. If you talk to somebody in the medical field, they will tell you rapid vaccination and second and third doses, if they're going to come, should be the priority. If you talk to a teacher, they'll tell you about, or an educationist, they'll tell you about the rollout of CBC, which is also a flagship project in terms of making education relevant to the needs of the future, to the needs of the country in the future, because we all know that rote learning is not going to hold us in good state in the future. So all these projects are important because there's no sector which is more important than the other.
In the month of May, we saw the operationalization of the first berth at the port of Lamu. Lamu sits at the center of Vision 2030. Tell us more about this project.
Lamu is one of the flagship projects. It is one of the it's like all of them are important, but Lamu is one of the more important ones because of the role, the outsized role Lamu is expected to play. The first 3 berths have been completed. It's not just one berth, it is 3 berths that have been completed by government, and there are 29 more berths in the original plan. This has been scaled down to 23 in the current term. So there are 23 new berths. The way Kenya Vision 2030 was envisioned, it's supposed to be funded 30% by government and 70% by private sector. So our biggest concern right now is to activate private sector funding and investment in Kenya Vision 2030. The port of Lamu is important because it will give us a second transport corridor. What we have now is what is popularly known as the Northern Corridor, which starts in Mombasa, comes to Nairobi, goes to Eldoret, and then goes to Busia or Malaba at the border with Uganda, and onwards to Uganda, Rwanda, Burundi, South Sudan. So this port is critically important because it allows us to have a second transport corridor. But beyond that, it is very important strategically for this country to open up northern Kenya and integrate it into the larger economy of the country. You do that, first of all, by improving access. You can't integrate a region which is inaccessible. So the first thing you must do for 2/3 of Kenya, we must remember that, is integrate the northern part of Kenya. And that is what the LAPSSET corridor is doing, that because we are doing new roads from Lamu all the way through Wajir to Isiolo and then onwards to Turkana. And if you look at that on a map, you'll see very clearly what we have right now is the northern corridor, which is from Mombasa to Malaba, which is in what is called down Kenya. It is in the bottom third of the country. If you look at Lamu Port where it is and the corridor the way it is going, you'll find that it is now in the middle and the north part of the country. So this will open up the country, which hasn't happened before. And if you talk to people who come from northern Kenya, they will tell you, even with the two roads which have been done and completed, talk about, for example, the new road, Isiolo, Marsabit, Moyale. It has completely changed the lives of people along that side, both ways. If you think about the other one, which is joining Kitale to Lodwar and then on to the border with South Sudan, it has completely changed the lives of people there. And it's not just access for people, for business, for farming produce, it is also security, because security concerns can be addressed much more efficiently. So the Lamu port is important because it anchors all those things which are starting from the port all the way into the hinterland.
As you are saying, the financing of a project under Vision 2030 is hinged majorly on a private investor. We are having challenges with debt in this country. How would this impact borrowing for projects under Vision 2030?
Okay, like I said, Kenya Vision 2030 is designed to be 30% funded by government and 70% funded by the private sector. Let's talk about debt for a minute. Those of you who have, those of you who have ever done a building on construction project, kama umejenga mahali popote, kama ni nyumba yako ama ni mahali ya biashara, if you've been involved in building, you know that you have to dig foundations, depending on the structure you want to build. And the depth of your foundation depends on how high you want your structure to go. So if you want to have a skyscraper like KICC, you won't have foundations which go only 10 meters. You're likely to go, multiples of that. This is where we find ourselves, because the person who, in this whole mix, the person who has to do the heavy lifting is government, because government can marshal resources. So you find government has taken on the big, heavy, foundational projects. For example, doing SGR. If you think the railway we have now, it was made 100 years ago. And for 100 years, it served Kenya's needs. For most of 100 years, it served Kenya's needs. So when you see SGR and talk about its cost now, you need to amortize that cost over decades, because we'll not be building another SGR soon. What you'll do is modernize it, or maybe electrify it, make it faster, so that you make it, you extract the maximum value from it. So government has no choice but to engage in very expensive projects, because these are the foundations upon which the private sector will then come. And for example, start a business at the port, go to the special economic zone at the port of Lamu or Naivasha or Kisumu or Dongokundu in Mombasa or elsewhere. So when you talk about debt, it's important to understand, and the analogy I find easiest is to explain in terms of building. Kenya Vision 2030 is a huge monstrosity. We want very many things. We want this country to be newly industrializing by 2030. We want to be living in a safe and secure environment by 2030. You want to be a middle income country by 2030. All these are very ambitious and hairy goals, as I like to put it. To facilitate that, you have enabling infrastructure, because if you don't have the enabling infrastructure, you will never be able to go up. So I would like Kenyans to begin understanding the cost of these projects and the cost of the foundational infrastructural base that the country has been putting is high. But it is high and it cannot be cheaper. It can't be cheaper, because if you look at the infrastructural enabling infrastructure being put down, it is capital intensive. If you want to do an airport, if you want to do a port, if you want to do a major road, if you want to do an expressway, you're talking billions of dollars. And this is an investment which this country has to put in. Because if we say that we don't have money and we shouldn't do this, then 10 years from now you'll be complaining because other sectors of the economy have moved, but there's no enabling infrastructure to help get your goods to market. If you've started a small cottage industry, how do you get your goods to market? How do you get to the airport? How do you fly them out? How do you ship them out? So it's government's unfortunate duty to do the heavy lifting and to do the hard work of laying the infrastructure. And infrastructure by definition is expensive. When that is done, private citizens then have a chance to go to a place like Konza, for example, and find that there's an office, there are facilities, roads have been laid, there's internet, you can actually set up your business. But until government does that first, you will never be able to go there and do anything. So government has to go in front, put down the roads, put down the expressways, put down the airports, put down the train stations, put down all this infrastructure, revamp the education system to go to CBC, so that we stop cramming and memorizing and rewarding that, and start rewarding thinkers and people who are creatives, because the future belongs to thinkers and creatives. It doesn't belong to rote memorizers anymore. Even in teaching in class, it doesn't help nowadays to go and read notes which are 20 years old. Even the students won't take that. You have to be current and be creative and innovative. So this is a big burden government is carrying. We have to incur the big costs to do Lamu Port, to do the expressway, to do the SGR, to do all these things, but it's painful. It's painful in terms of taxation, and it's painful in terms of the immediate benefit is not being seen. The immediate benefit for some people cannot see the immediate benefit. What's the benefit of SGR? You must talk to a business person who uses that thing every day to understand the value of SGR. Yeah. Eventually one day you'll understand it. But for now, every bit of infrastructure, every bit of government input is appreciated by the people who are there. But you need to have a helicopter view to see how everything fits into everything else, and how this base being done by government is what is going to provide the foundations for economic uplift, not just in the short term, but in the long term.
And you're talking about the year 2030, which is less than 9 years from where we are. A lot of people, when they hear Vision 2030, a newly industrialized and prosperous country, what comes into their mind is it's like we're going to cross over a river and enter into a new country which is disease-free, crime-free, corruption-free. Is this the case?
The objectives of Kenya Vision 2030 are big. They are hairy. They are audacious, because we want to have all these things. For example, we want to be a newly industrialized country by 2030. Industries. When you talk about industries, it's not easy. You're talking about electricity, because you can't run industries without power. So you're talking about electricity from geothermal sources, and you're talking about solar power, our two main issues, and geothermal and other sources of power. So right now we have installed capacity exceeding our peak demand because of the investment which has been made. That's a good thing. It's been expensive, but it means that there is now space to grow our industries, even cottage industries. We say we want universal health care for all by 2030. This is achievable, and there are reforms going on right now at NHIF. And what COVID has taught us, all of us, each and every Kenyan, is that all of us are just one illness away from financial disaster. All of us. Doesn't matter who you are, whether you're a billionaire or you're a pauper. You're just one illness away from ruin, financial ruin for most people. So the NHIF is something which we're encouraging Kenyans to take up and take it up seriously. It has kinks, but the kinks and the small problems will be ironed out. But the determination is real to reform the NHIF so that healthcare, you have majority, if not all Kenyans, covered comprehensively on healthcare. And you find that Kenya has done very well. If you look at our neighbors, and if you look at countries which can be compared economic-wise in terms of the size of the economy and size of population to Kenya, Kenya is doing very well. So there are very, very many achievements, big achievements, good achievements which have been done. Right now we are going through a rather painful process. We've gone through it in the around in the mid-80s. There was a transition from the old system to the 844 system. And the KCPE examination, some of us were caught up in that melee. Around 1990, there was another similar issue, and now we're also doing. So this country is constantly trying to see what education system works best for us. Kenyans are a peculiar lot. We are actually a special type of people. If you look at the things we go through and our spirit as a country, our spirit as a people, it's very, very positive. So what we're trying to see here is whether we're able to convert all these things to allow Kenyans the opportunity to be themselves. And when Kenyans start running, you know.
It is true. I mean, to say that a lot of projects have been implemented under Vision 2030. Significant progress has also been made under Vision 2030. But how do you convince somebody who doesn't have food to eat, who doesn't have a Medicare, who's even getting, school fees is a problem, that Kenya is progressing?
We worry about poverty a lot, because when you have poverty, and if poverty is rampant and widespread, that is a formula for social unrest. So it is in nobody's interests to have people hungry, because the hungry people are an angry people, and an angry people are not people you want to deal with. So we are doing everything. Programs to help the small and micro enterprises. We have all these affirmative action funds to put the youth, particularly because the youth are the ones in the direst need of employment or useful things to do. We're trying to encourage people to stop thinking about employment as the only way out, because it is impossible for everybody to get employment.
When you look at Vision 2030 and all the projects that are envisioned before we get to the year 2030, how would you rate it?
We have done well, but we can do better. We have done well. That is acknowledging the effort which has gone into everything which is on the ground right now, everything which can be seen. We have done well, but we can do better in terms of sharpening the focus to the parts of the economy which need an injection, which then have an outlandish effect, a bigger effect. Infrastructure is one of them. And it's expensive, you see. Because, for example, O'Brien, if you can't get to Wajir, you will never know what is there, what opportunities there are there, what you can do there, what's missing there, what's lacking there. You have to get there first, look around and realize, hey, this place has potential. I don't know why nobody has seen it. I've seen it. Let me go back, nijipange, and I come back here and I start selling vegetables. Because I come from Nyandarua. So if I'm selling potatoes in Nyandarua, or I want to enter the potato business in Nyandarua, you find it is a saturated market. Babalaos are there of that business. You will never break in. So you want to go to greenfields. So greenfields are where? It's Wajir, it's Garissa, it's far-flung parts of this country which were previously inaccessible, for example, but which are now accessible. A week and a half ago, I was in Lamu, and there's a new road, Lamu, Witu, Garsen, which wasn't there before. If you talk to the people who live along that road, and it's a rich agricultural area, by the way, if you talk to the people on that road, they are over the moon. They can't believe how their lives have changed in their lifetime. You talk to people, then they tell you, I kept wishing and hoping and praying I would see an inch of tarmac in my lifetime in my home. Now I've seen it, and now I'm telling my children, you have no excuse now. Let us redouble our agricultural efforts, because now our crops are not getting they're not rotting because the roads they're not there, or it has rained and there's mud and you're stuck in the mud. So there's a lot which has happened, which is very, very good all over the place, and it's having a very good effect. But we can do better in terms of the last period. You asked how. Infrastructure is one of them. We have to accelerate the reforms in healthcare. We have to accelerate the reforms in housing. We have to improve our housing. And we also have to, most importantly in my opinion, configure and find the answer to private sector involvement in Kenya Vision 2030. Because until we have the major partner, and the major partner here is Wananchi, government is a minority partner in Kenya Vision 2030, 30%. The majority shareholder and the director is actually the Wanjiku, the average Kenyan. And Wanjiku is expected in the design of Kenya Vision 2030 to fund 70% of all these programs. So the emphasis right now for quicker acceleration of achievement of Kenya Vision 2030 is involvement of the 70% shareholder. And government has taken a lot of steps towards that. There's a new Public-Private Partnership Act, which is under preparation. There's a new department looking specifically under PPPs, and it's headed by an investment banker, somebody who knows what should happen. So with all these things happening all over the place, the building blocks are in place, and what we can do now is just play our part and find out how you can participate.
Before I let you go, how then do we ensure that even as we move forward with Vision 2030, we carry everybody on board?
One of my key objectives at Kenya Vision 2030, I've been in post for a year now, 2 more years, God willing, is to communicate what Kenya Vision 2030 is and your role in it as a citizen. If you decide to think with a futuristic mind, think about your children, think about your grandchildren. What sort of country do you want them to live in? What sort of businesses do you want them to be doing? What sort of education do you want them to have? What sort of healthcare do you want them to have? These are all the things which are happening now. So for public participation and citizen participation, the doors of government are open. We are opening all available channels to communicate with government. And for citizens to tell us, this is working well, this is not working well, this needs to be improved, or I want to participate here. And you find Kenyans are very, very willing to participate. You know our Harambee spirit. And every time, if you just want to do a social experiment, every time there's a small problem or a disaster, Kenyans come together. If there's famine in Turkana, Kenyans reach into their pockets to help. So Kenyans have helping hearts. And that is what we want to see being activated. And we're doing this by, for example, with the State Department for Youth. We are holding what we are calling kikaos, where government comes to the ground to talk to you and to be pinned down. These are not a very easy sessions for government officers, because you're sitting there with the people and they're asking you hard questions, and then we're doing this continuously, so it's not a hit and run. So if somebody asked you, very surprisingly by the way, somebody asked me a question at a kikao in Kilifi, and I found that person in kikao in Embu last weekend. Yeah, following up on their issue. Yeah. So it's very, very good when government gets to the ground and meets with the citizen on a constant basis. Because if you want to sharpen two knives, you have to keep rubbing them together. Yeah, as opposed to having silos where government is on one side, the citizens are on the other, and here in the middle is a big valley or rift valley which no one can cross. So we have bridged that gap. We're now talking to citizens directly. We're providing forums for citizens to come and engage, not just to criticize, but also to find out what programs of government there are and how they can interface with them and how they can help them. For example, affirmative action funds, Uwezo Fund, Youth Fund, etc.
Very well. Thank you very much for finding time to be with us this afternoon, and of course to explain to us where we are in terms of progress on Vision 2030. Very well. Well, we have been talking to the Director General of Vision 2030, Kenneth Muige, trying to track the progress of Vision 2030. Where are we? What needs to be done? Who needs to do what? Because at the end of it all, Vision 2030 is our project. My name is O'Brien Kimani. Thank you for your time. We do this again every Friday right here on KBC Channel 1. Have a good afternoon.